If you've ever turned pain into purpose, hit that subscribe button. This channel is made for your story. Let's get started. Failure is not the opposite of success. It's a part of success. Most people fear failure. They see it as an end, as a defeat, as a sign that they are not good enough. But what if failure is actually the beginning of something great? What if it's not a dead end, but a redirection? A push towards the path you were always meant to follow. Throughout human history, some of the most successful and inspiring individuals have built their legacies not in spite of their failures, but because of them. They use their disappointments, setbacks, and defeats as fuel to grow stronger, wiser, and more focused. The truth is, how we respond to failure often determines the trajectory of our lives far more than any initial success ever could. Most people are taught from a young age to avoid failure at all costs. Schools reward correct answers and penalize mistakes. Society praises perfection and punishes error. In this environment, failure begins to carry a heavy emotional charge: shame, guilt, embarrassment. So it's no wonder that so many people never take risks, never chase their dreams, and never reach their full potential. They're paralyzed by the fear of falling short. But those who dare to embrace failure, who see it not as a threat but as a teacher, unlock a different kind of power. They understand that growth and comfort do not coexist. Real growth begins when we step out of our comfort zones, stumble, fall, and learn to rise again with more knowledge, resilience, and clarity. Think about it. Failure is often the clearest feedback life can give you. When something doesn't work, it tells you where to adjust, what to improve, and how to move forward more intelligently. A failed business venture teaches you more about strategy, leadership, and market demand than any textbook could. A broken relationship reveals deeper truths about communication, emotional needs, and personal values. A rejection letter can redirect you toward a path that better aligns with your talents and passions. Of course, all of this depends on your mindset. Failure can either define you or refine you. If you see yourself as a failure, you'll stop trying. But if you see failure as an experience, one that every human encounters on the road to mastery, you'll bounce back stronger every time. One of the most empowering beliefs you can adopt is this: I never fail. I either win or I learn. This mindset transforms your relationship with risk and effort. It encourages you to try new things, to aim higher, to put yourself out there. Because even if you don't succeed right away, you're still progressing. You're gathering the data you need to improve. You're evolving. Let's take a moment to explore the psychology behind failure. Why does it hurt so much? Why do we avoid it? And how can we change that? Neuroscientists have found that the brain processes social rejection and failure in much the same way it processes physical pain. This means that when you fail, especially in front of others, it literally hurts. Your brain perceives a threat to your social status, your identity, your self-worth. But this is also why failure can be such a powerful catalyst for growth. Pain, after all, demands our attention. It forces us to confront what isn't working. It motivates us to make changes we might otherwise avoid. Think about going to the gym. Your muscles grow not during the workout itself, but during recovery, after they've been torn and challenged. The pain you feel is a signal that growth is happening. In the same way, the emotional discomfort of failure signals the beginning of transformation. If you can lean into that discomfort rather than run from it, you unlock a new level of resilience. You learn to regulate your emotions, challenge your self-doubt, and rebuild with intention. This is why so many high achievers, athletes, entrepreneurs, artists, embrace failure as part of their process. They know it's not a matter of if they'll fail, but when. And when that time comes, they don't panic. They reflect, they adjust, they try again. One key to using failure as fuel is reflection. You can't grow from your mistakes if you don't take the time to understand them. After a setback, ask yourself, what happened? Why did it happen? What role did I play? What can I do differently next time? These questions aren't about assigning blame. They're about gathering insight, about becoming a more aware, intentional version of yourself. Journaling can be an especially powerful tool here. When you write about your failures, you externalize them. You take them out of your head and put them on paper, where they lose some of their emotional weight. You begin to see patterns, connections, and lessons. Over time, this practice builds emotional intelligence and self-awareness, two traits that are essential for personal and professional growth. Another strategy is to reframe failure as experimentation. Think like a scientist. A failed experiment isn't a bad thing, it's information. It tells you what doesn't work so you can try something else. It's a step forward, not backward. Thomas Edison famously said, "I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work." That's the mindset of a growth-oriented person. They don't internalize failure, they analyze it. They don't make it about their identity, they make it about the process. They remain committed to the outcome, flexible in the approach. Of course, not all failures are equal. Some are small, a missed deadline, a poor presentation. Others are life-altering, a business collapse, a divorce, a serious financial loss. These bigger failures can shake you to your core. They can make you question everything about yourself, your path, your worth. But even here, perhaps especially here, growth is possible. In fact, many people report that their biggest breakthroughs came from their darkest seasons. Rock bottom, for all its pain, can be a solid foundation upon which to rebuild. It strips away illusions, distractions, and ego. It forces you to get real with yourself and with life. It compels you to rebuild not just your circumstances, but your character. And that kind of growth is unshakable. It's rooted in humility, clarity, and grit. To use failure as fuel, you also need community. Surround yourself with people who understand the value of trying, failing, learning, and trying again. People who don't judge you by your setbacks, but to support you through them. People who remind you of your potential when you forget. Isolation makes failure feel heavier. Connection makes it lighter. When you hear other people's stories, when you learn about their failures and how they overcame them, you realize you're not alone. You realize that failure is part of the human condition. It's something we all experience, not something to be ashamed of. And in that shared experience, you find courage. You find inspiration. Let's talk about the long-term benefits of learning from failure. People who face setbacks and grow from them tend to develop grit, a quality that psychologist Angela Duckworth defines as passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Grit is one of the best predictors of success in any field. It's what keeps you going when motivation fades. It's what fuels your effort when things get hard. And how is grit developed? Through failure, through struggle, through the process of falling down and getting back up again and again. Failure also breeds innovation. When you fail, you're forced to get creative. You have to think differently, problem solve, and experiment. Many of the world's greatest inventions and breakthroughs were born from failure. Think of the Post-it note, which was the result of a failed adhesive, or penicillin, which was discovered by accident when Alexander Fleming's experiment didn't go as planned. These examples remind us that failure is not the end of creativity, it's the beginning. When you accept failure as part of the journey, you begin to take bigger risks. And with bigger risks come bigger rewards. But perhaps the most profound gift of failure is empathy. When you've struggled, when you've fallen short, felt the sting of disappointment, and had to rebuild, you develop a deeper understanding of others. You become less judgmental, more compassionate, more human. And this makes you a better leader, partner, parent, and friend. Because growth isn't just about achieving more, it's about becoming more wise, more grounded, more connected to yourself and others. In a world that celebrates success, let us also learn to celebrate failure, not for its pain, but for its power, for its ability to shape us, teach us, and push us toward our highest selves. When you learn to use past failures as fuel, you step into a version of yourself that is unstoppable. You stop fearing mistakes and start embracing them. You stop doubting your path and start trusting your process. You realize that every setback carries within it the seeds of a comeback. You just have to water them with reflection, resilience, and resolve. One of the most overlooked aspects of failure is the clarity it provides. When a plan doesn't work, when an opportunity collapses, when an effort ends in disappointment, it forces you to examine the details with brutal honesty. There's no longer room for illusion or denial. You are left with facts, feedback, and the raw materials to build something better. And clarity is power, because with clarity, you stop guessing and start acting with precision. You start making intentional changes, not desperate moves. You start understanding what's truly important, and that focus drives deeper growth. Consider how often we stay in the wrong situations because we're afraid to fail by walking away. We stay in toxic jobs, unhealthy relationships, or unfulfilling routines out of fear. But when something finally breaks, when the failure happens, we're forced to confront what we've been avoiding. That breakdown becomes a breakthrough. It shines a light on what needs to be healed, changed, or released. Failure removes the disguise. And once you see clearly, you can't go back to living in confusion. That's why so many people look back on their failures with gratitude, even if it took them years to feel that way. They realize that moment of collapse was the beginning of something much truer. Failure is also one of the greatest teachers of humility. When you succeed too quickly or too easily, it can breed ego. It can trick you into thinking you've figured everything out, that you're invincible. But when you stumble, when life humbles you, you gain perspective. You start to understand the limits of your control, the gaps in your knowledge, the importance of listening, learning, and growing continuously. And humility is not weakness, it's strength. It's what allows you to evolve, to stay open, to adapt to change rather than resist it. In fact, some of the most respected leaders in the world, people known for wisdom, influence, and grace, carry a history of profound failures. But those failures didn't destroy them. They shaped them. They gave them empathy, depth, and strength that success alone could never have provided. If you want to build something that lasts, failure is not an enemy. It's a mentor. It's not there to hurt you, but to prepare you. And preparation often looks like discomfort, disappointment, and delay. Because real growth doesn't happen when things are easy. It happens when you're stretched, challenged, and pushed to your edge. Failure introduces you to that edge, and then it invites you to expand beyond it. The problem many people face is that they don't give themselves permission to fail. They expect perfection. They believe mistakes are proof they're not good enough. This mindset is toxic, and it keeps you stuck. It creates a fear of trying, but growth requires experimentation, and experimentation includes failure by design. You can't improve what you're not willing to risk doing poorly at first. That's why progress often looks messy in the beginning. It's full of detours, false starts, and lessons learned the hard way. But that's the price of mastery. Nobody starts out as an expert. Nobody begins their journey at the top. Everyone stumbles. Everyone learns. Everyone falls. What matters is who gets back up and how they rise. To reframe failure in your life, start by rewriting your inner narrative. Listen to how you talk to yourself after a mistake. Do you call yourself names? Do you spiral into shame? Do you replay the moment over and over, beating yourself up for not doing better? That inner dialogue shapes your reality. If you want to grow, you must learn to speak to yourself with the same compassion you would offer a friend. Remind yourself, this didn't work, but I'm still learning. I'm still capable. I'm still moving forward. Self-compassion doesn't mean avoiding responsibility. It means holding yourself accountable without destroying your spirit. It means recognizing the gap between where you are and where you want to be, and believing you have the power to close it. That belief is the foundation of a growth mindset. Another powerful tool is visualization. Athletes have used this technique for decades to enhance performance. They don't just train their bodies, they train their minds. They mentally rehearse overcoming obstacles, staying focused under pressure, and bouncing back after mistakes. You can do the same. Visualize yourself handling failure with strength. Picture yourself analyzing the setback, learning from it, and applying that lesson in your next attempt. This trains your brain to associate failure not with panic, but with progress. It builds a mental habit of resilience. You start to expect challenges, and you start to trust yourself to handle them. And trust is everything. When you trust yourself, you stop fearing failure. You know that no matter what happens, you will figure it out. You will keep going. You will grow. And that self-trust becomes a kind of superpower. It gives you the courage to take bold steps, the endurance to stay the course, and the wisdom to learn at every stage. The truth is, your past failures are already in your story. You can't erase them, but you can redefine them. You can choose to see them not as shameful moments, but as sacred ones. Turning points, growth points, moments where you faced the truth, adjusted your course, and became a stronger, more focused version of yourself. Start by making a failure inventory. Write down the major failures you've experienced in your life. For each one, ask yourself, what did I learn? How did it change me? What strength did I gain from that experience? You might be surprised by how much growth came out of those moments. You might see that what felt like the worst thing at the time was actually guiding you towards something far better. Sometimes we need to lose what's not meant for us to find what is. And failure does that better than anything else. It clears the path. It closes the wrong doors. It wakes you up. If you allow it, failure becomes your greatest ally. It becomes the fire that forges you. And like all fires, it burns, but it also purifies. It strips away the excess, the ego, the noise. What's left is real. What's left is strong. And from that place you rebuild, smarter, steadier, and more aligned with your true path. One of the most inspiring things about using failure as fuel is that it makes you unstoppable. Because once you stop fearing failure, nothing can control you. Not rejection, not criticism, not loss. You realize that everything is a lesson. Everything is a stepping stone. You begin to see that life is not about avoiding pain, but learning how to use it. Not about avoiding falls, but learning how to rise. And that mindset, resilient, courageous, and grounded, is what leads to lasting success. Not just success in terms of achievements, but success in terms of fulfillment, joy, integrity, wholeness. So the next time you fail, and you will, pause before you react. Don't numb it, don't deny it, don't drown in it. Face it, ask it what it's here to teach you, and then listen. Listen with an open heart. Listen with curiosity. Listen with the belief that even in this pain, there is purpose. Because there always is. Every failure is a lesson in disguise. And when you choose to see it that way, you become someone who grows no matter what life throws at you. That's real power. That's real freedom. And it's available to you right now. No matter how many times you've fallen, no matter how far you feel from where you want to be, your past failures are not chains, they're tools, they're data, they're evidence that you tried, and that's worth honoring. Keep trying, keep learning, keep growing. You are not your failures. You are what you do with them. Growth that emerges from failure often carries a depth and authenticity that polished, easy wins rarely produce. That's because failure doesn't just change your outcomes. It changes your character. It transforms your inner landscape, challenges your beliefs, tests your values, and forges emotional muscles that no amount of success alone can strengthen. When you walk through failure and come out the other side, you are no longer the same person. You're wiser, stronger, and more self-aware. And this transformation becomes the foundation of sustainable growth. Think of people who have achieved something truly meaningful. Not overnight influencers, but those who've spent years honing their craft, building their integrity, and developing emotional intelligence. Behind every one of them is a string of failures, products that didn't sell, projects that collapsed, relationships that ended, risks that didn't pay off. But they didn't stop. They didn't take failure as a final verdict. They took it as information. They studied it, learned from it, adjusted, and moved forward with more clarity. That's how mastery is built, on the bricks of broken plans, on the ashes of past attempts. Real success is not built on luck or shortcuts. It's built on persistence. And persistence is shaped in the fire of failure. One of the most important shifts you can make is to stop seeing failure as personal. It's not about you being bad or unworthy. It's about an approach, an idea, a moment in time that didn't work out. When you detach your identity from your outcomes, you give yourself permission to experiment. You stop needing everything to work perfectly the first time. You stop measuring your worth by your wins. And that opens up space for boldness, creativity, and innovation. Because the truth is, if you're not failing, you're probably not pushing your limits. you're staying in the safe zone. And the safe zone may feel comfortable, but it's rarely where transformation happens. To grow, you have to stretch. To stretch, you have to try. To try, you have to risk. And risk always carries the possibility of failure. But what's the alternative? To live your whole life avoiding discomfort, shrinking your dreams to fit your fears, and looking back with regret because you never gave yourself a chance to find out what you were truly capable of? Failure is painful, yes, but regret is worse. Regret is the slow ache of unlived potential. Failure, on the other hand, is proof that you showed up, that you cared enough to try, that you were brave enough to take action, even when you weren't guaranteed a win. And that bravery, that willingness to step into the unknown, is the birthplace of greatness. So how do you start turning your failures into fuel? First, practice radical responsibility. Own your part in what happened. This doesn't mean blaming yourself for everything. It means being honest about the decisions you made, the assumptions you held, the actions you took. When you take responsibility, you take your power back. You stop being a victim of your circumstances and become the author of your comeback. Next, extract the lessons. Ask deeper questions. What worked? What didn't? What would you do differently next time? What blind spots did this failure reveal? What strengths did it force you to develop? Every failure contains multiple insights if you're willing to look. And the more honest you are, the more you grow. Then make the adjustment. Don't just reflect, refine. Use what you've learned to shift your strategy, mindset, or habits. Apply the lesson. That's the key. Growth doesn't come from failure alone. It comes from what you do after failure. Most people want to avoid the pain of failure, so they move on quickly or pretend it didn't happen. But those who grow pause long enough to harvest the wisdom. They allow themselves to feel the discomfort without being consumed by it. They process, they learn, they integrate, and then they rise better than before. Building a growth-oriented life means building habits that support long-term learning. Start tracking your progress, not just your wins, but your attempts. Create a growth journal where you document the things you tried, how they went, and what you learned. Celebrate effort. Recognize courage. Give yourself credit for showing up, even when it didn't work out. This shifts your focus from outcome-based validation to process-based empowerment. It builds intrinsic motivation, which is far more sustainable than external praise. And over time, it rewires your brain to associate effort with growth rather than fear. Another key aspect is to normalize failure. Surround yourself with stories of people who failed and then succeeded. Read biographies, watch documentaries, listen to interviews. The more you expose yourself to these stories, the more you realize that failure is not exceptional. It's universal. It happens to everyone. And those who succeed are not the ones who never fail. They're the ones who keep going. They reframe their narrative. They turn their scars into symbols of strength. They use their past as a springboard, not a shackle. Think of J.K. Rowling, rejected by multiple publishers before Harry Potter became a global phenomenon. Think of Steve Jobs, fired from his own company before returning to make it iconic. Think of Oprah Winfrey, told she wasn't fit for television before becoming one of the most influential media figures in the world. None of these people would have reached their potential if they'd let failure define them. Instead, they let failure refine them. They let it teach them, strengthen them, redirect them. And that's available to you too. But it requires a shift in mindset, from fix to growth, from shame to strategy, from fear to curiosity. Start asking different questions. Not what if I fail, but what could I learn? Not what will people think, but who am I becoming through this? Not why did this happen to me, but how is this shaping me? These questions open doors. They move you from paralysis to possibility. They remind you that failure isn't the opposite of growth. It's the engine of it. One of the best ways to reinforce this mindset is to mentor others. When you share your experiences with failure, honestly and vulnerably, you not only help someone else, you deepen your own understanding. You start to see how far you've come. You recognize your resilience. You give your pain a purpose, and that creates meaning. It turns your struggles into service. And that is one of the most fulfilling forms of growth, because in helping others navigate their failures, You reinforce your own wisdom. You build a legacy of courage and compassion, and you realize that your failures weren't just about you. They were preparing you to lead, to guide, to inspire. But to get there, you must release perfectionism. You must give yourself permission to be human, to fall, to feel, to figure it out one step at a time. Perfection is the enemy of progress. It keeps you stuck in fear, afraid to start until you can guarantee success. But there are no guarantees. There's only action, feedback, and iteration. And that's enough. You don't need to be perfect. You just need to be willing. Willing to try, to learn, to grow. Willing to show up with courage, even when you're uncertain. Willing to believe that your future can be greater than your past if you use what you've learned to move forward. So the next time you find yourself in the aftermath of failure, pause, breathe, and remember this: you are not broken. You are being built. Every setback is a setup. Every fall is a forge. Every disappointment is a directive pointing you toward your next evolution. Let go of the idea that success means never failing. Real success is about how you respond when you do. It's about resilience, grit, vision, and a commitment to keep growing no matter what. You have that power. It's already within you. All you have to do is use it. In the final analysis, the power of failure lies in its ability to strip away illusions and show you who you really are. Not the curated version of yourself you present to the world, but the raw, unfinished, still evolving self that is being shaped by every experience, especially the ones that hurt. It is in those moments of loss, defeat, or brokenness that your true character is revealed and refined. Failure doesn't create weakness. It exposes what's already there. And once it's exposed, you can either deny it or develop it. You can ignore the lesson or lean into it. Those who grow the most are those who choose the latter. They understand that life is not about avoiding the fire, but about learning how to walk through it without losing their light. And that light, once tested, shines even brighter. Let's talk about reinvention. One of the most powerful outcomes of failure is that it often forces you to reinvent yourself. Maybe the identity you were clinging to is no longer working. Maybe the goals you were chasing weren't truly aligned with your core values. Maybe the version of success you had in mind was never really yours to begin with. Failure disrupts the script. It interrupts the autopilot. It gives you a chance to stop, reassess, and ask the deeper questions. Who am I really? What do I want now? What needs to change in me for the future I desire to become possible? These questions, sparked by failure, are the doorway to growth. Reinvention doesn't mean becoming someone else. It means becoming more fully yourself. It means shedding the layers of false belief, ego, and fear that were keeping you small. It means taking what you've learned, the hard-won wisdom, and applying it to the next version of your life with intention and clarity. This process is not instant. It requires patience, healing, grace. Sometimes after a big failure, the instinct is to rush back into action, to prove you're okay, to regain control. But true transformation happens in the space between what was and what will be. It's in that in-between space that you gather strength, redefine your vision, and align with a more authentic path. One of the hardest yet most essential parts of growing through failure is forgiveness, especially self-forgiveness. So many people stay stuck not because they failed, but because they keep punishing themselves for it. They replay the moment, the decision, the mistake. They wear it like a badge of shame. But shame is not a growth strategy. It keeps you trapped in the past. It whispers lies that say you're not worthy of another chance. But you are. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone misses the mark. What matters is what you choose to believe about yourself in the aftermath. Self-forgiveness is not about excusing poor choices. It's about acknowledging them, making amends where possible, and deciding that you are still worthy of love, growth, and a meaningful life. You can't rewrite the past, but you can choose how it shapes you. When you forgive yourself, you free up energy that was being used to hide, to shrink, to feel small. That energy can now be used to create, to move forward, to make a difference. Forgiveness clears the path. It makes growth possible. Let's talk now about resilience. Resilience isn't just about bouncing back. It's about coming back stronger. It's about integrating what you've learned and allowing it to fortify you. Every time you overcome a failure, you build a reserve of inner strength, and that strength becomes part of your identity. You begin to trust that no matter what happens, you'll find a way through it. You'll adapt. You'll overcome. This kind of self-trust is the foundation of all meaningful growth. It enables you to dream bigger, risk more, and lead with confidence. And it comes almost always through the experience of falling and rising. Resilience also makes you a better support to others. When you walk through failure yourself, you become a safe space for others going through their own struggles. You become more empathetic, more patient, more real. You understand what it feels like to lose and to rise again. And that understanding connects you to people in a deeper way. Your story becomes a source of hope, not because it's perfect, but because it's honest. The world needs more of that kind of authenticity. It needs leaders, mentors, and friends who aren't pretending to have it all together, but who are willing to share what they've learned through pain. When you own your failures without shame, you create a culture where growth is not just allowed but expected, where mistakes are not the end but the beginning of wisdom. And in such a culture, greatness flourishes. If you're in a season of failure right now, I want you to know something deeply important. This is not the end of your story. It's a chapter, maybe a hard one, maybe one that hurts, but it's not the whole book. And you get to decide what the next chapter looks like. You get to choose what you carry forward, what you leave behind, and what you build from here. You are not disqualified by your failures. You are being shaped by them. You are becoming more resilient, more grounded, more prepared for the life you're meant to live. One day you'll look back on this moment, not with bitterness, but with gratitude, because it will have become the turning point. The moment when you stopped hiding and started growing. The moment when you stopped chasing perfection and started building purpose. The moment when you realized that failure was not your enemy, it was your guide. From this place of clarity, what steps can you take now? Maybe it's reaching out to someone you trust and sharing what you're going through. Maybe it's journaling your thoughts so you can make sense of them. Maybe it's mapping out a new plan, one built not on fear of failure, but on the lessons failure has taught you. Or maybe it's simply resting, giving yourself time to heal and breathe before you begin again. Whatever your next step is, take it with intention, take it with courage. Take it knowing that the path forward is not straight, not perfect, but profoundly worth it. Your growth is not measured by how few mistakes you've made, but by how much you've learned from them. And when you start seeing failure as part of the process, everything changes. You begin to move with confidence, not because you're guaranteed to win, but because you're no longer afraid to lose. That's real power. That's what makes a person unstoppable. The final gift of failure is vision. When you stop being afraid of falling, you begin to dream again. You start setting goals not just to prove something, but to become someone. You aim higher, dig deeper, love harder, live fuller. Because you know now what matters. You've seen what doesn't work. You've learned what can't be sustained. And in its place, you're building something more lasting, more true, more you. This is the journey of becoming. It's messy, it's beautiful, and it's built one failed attempt at a time. So give yourself permission to fail and to rise, to stumble and to keep walking, to fall apart and to come back together stronger than before. You are not defined by what broke you. You are defined by how you rebuild. Use every failure as fuel. Let it drive you, humble you, teach you, and ultimately transform you. You have what it takes. You are not finished. You are just getting started.